Hi, my name's Amy Setman. I'm the Marketing Director at JCP Solicitors. In this series of short videos, we'll be chatting with members of JCP to answer your frequently asked questions. And today I'm here with Director and Head of Inheritance and Trusts Disputes, Richard Howells. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Ruby.
Welcome today. Today we're going to keep it quite simple, actually, and we're just going to talk about contesting a will, and what you can do as an individual if someone you love has sadly passed away, and you feel like their will hasn't really provided for you adequately, which might be the situation in which you would want to seek legal advice to see where you stand. So I believe there are some specific conditions that a will has to meet to be valid. Is that correct?
Yeah, amazingly, the rules go back to 1837.
So just a bit of history, like any old law, really.
Yeah, it's a fast-moving area of law. So it first of all must be in writing. Secondly, it must be signed by the will maker, which is sometimes called the testator. And then thirdly, the will must be witnessed, or the signature of the will maker must be witnessed, or at least acknowledged in the presence of two witnesses, which are called the attesting witnesses. Neither of those witnesses can have any benefit from the will, otherwise any gift they left would be invalidated.
And are there any kind of like specific conditions? So, for example, if I thought that the person who made the will was perhaps not in their right mind at the time?
So there tends to be 4 grounds on which you can challenge the validity of the will. There is a fifth, but for the purposes of brevity today. So the first one touches upon what we've just discussed, which is lack of formality. The reason why that exists is the law doesn't want people accidentally making wills by writing down thoughts or notes or things like that. So it has to be clear they were intending to make a will. The second most common way a will is challenged is lack of testamentary capacity. That basically means that someone must have sufficient understanding and be mentally well enough to understand the nature of what they're doing. The third way wills are often challenged is something called lack of knowledge and approval, and that requires someone to know they're making a will and to approve its contents. The fourth possible ground of challenge, probably the one I get the most calls about, is undue influence, and that basically is where someone's will has been overpowered to such an extent by someone who's in a fairly dominant or domineering position of them that the will doesn't reflect what would have otherwise been their true wishes and intentions.
Sounds like it's a really emotional area of the law to have to deal with. If I was financially dependent on someone and they passed away, and perhaps their will was written some time ago and it wasn't quite up to date, for example, and that will hadn't provided for me, is there anything I can do?
Yes. So there's often a confusion as between challenging a will and challenging an estate. So in that instance, you wouldn't necessarily be saying the will or the rules of intestacy were invalid. What you would be saying is the estate as it's currently been left doesn't make sufficient provision for your needs. We're dealing with an act from 1975 called...
Another brand new modern one?
Another brand new modern one. It's called the Inheritance Provision for Family and Dependents Act. It's often known as the 1975 Act or the Inheritance Act because of the length of the title. And what that act allows is people who fall within a certain criteria set out within the act. So you're looking there at spouses, cohabiting partners of over 2 years, children, and others who are financially dependent on the person who's passed away. If they haven't had sufficient provision left for them, either in the will or if there's no will under the rules of intestacy, they could look at potentially bringing a claim.
And obviously when someone you love passes away, it's an extremely emotional time and there's lots going on and lots to deal with, and this may not be your first thought, but down the line you may think, oh, do you know, I probably should have done something, I should have thought about that. how soon should you act as an individual if you think that a will should have provided for you and that person's wishes probably was to provide for you, but perhaps the will hadn't been updated, etc.?
Sure. So under the 1975 Act, there's a time limit of 6 months from the date that the grant of probate was made. So it's not the date of death, it's the date the grant of probate was made. So it's quite important to get some fairly prompt advice, because 6 months sounds a long time, but in terms of preparing a strong and thorough legal argument, time ticks away quite quickly.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time today, Richard. And thanks for joining us for another episode of Let's Chat with JCP. Join us again for our next Frequently Asked Legal Questions.